There are warnings some supermarket shelves could be left empty if the biggest rail strike in more than 30 years goes ahead at the end of the month.
50,000 staff could walk out, impacting freight services as well as passenger lines. This disruption, coupled with potential strike action by British Airways workers and Heathrow Airport, could create a summer of chaos. Charlotte has more. Charlotte.
Yes, let's take a look at the details. The RMT union plans on walking out on the 21st, the 23rd and the 25th of June. That's across the national rail network, with 13 train operators set to stage a walkout. Now, walkouts would coincide with a number of events this summer, including Glastonbury Festival, which is back for the first time since 2019, England's cricket test match in Leeds, the British Athletics Championships in Manchester, as well as Elton John and the Rolling Stones concerts at London's Hyde Park. So it's set to cause considerable disruption.
Yeah, lots of disruption to people's plans. Well, ministers are looking at drawing up laws which would ban industrial action on the transport network unless a minimum number of staff continue working. So should the law be changed to stop transport workers from striking?
We're joined to discuss this by broadcaster Christo Fufas, who says that strikes should be made illegal and that walkouts are selfish. We also have journalist Ash Sarkar, who disagrees, saying the selfish ones are the bosses who are imposing bad working conditions. Good morning to both of you. Thank you for joining us this morning. Ash, there'll be a lot of people waking up this morning who will be saying we have this horrific cost of living squeeze. Fuel costs have gone up dramatically. Even yesterday, they've gone up the most they have in 17 years. Energy prices are soaring. The last thing we need is the threat of rail action, which means on those 3 days when I have to go to work, I can't use my car because it's too expensive. I've got to go on the train, and now I can't do that either.
I'd actually flip it the other way around, all right? In a context where the cost of living crisis is being paid for by ordinary workers, the thing that you need are strong unions and the ability to collectively bargain for better pay and conditions. Now, why the RMT are striking, which is, I notice, not something people have talked about, is that workers who had been keeping the railways running during the pandemic are being threatened with job cuts and a pay freeze, which would mean that their pay isn't keeping up with inflation. And so that's why the union is doing their job and saying, we will use our strength, which is the fact that you can't run this without us, to protect and defend our workers' conditions. That is the job of a trade union. And if it's so important to keep the railway running, because I agree, these workers are totally essential, then the bosses should be coming up with a reasonable package that the workers can accept.
I mean, we have talked about that on this programme, don't worry already. Lisa Nanda's put that point. But it is a relevant one, isn't it? If this is so important that it causes so much disruption, why not meet the unions and compromise and value their position?
Well, I don't believe you can have it both ways. I don't believe that you can say we must give in to the demands because these workers are essential. Oh, but they're not essential enough that we say that strikes among those workers shouldn't be allowed anymore, which is what I believe. Now, this industry, if we're talking about people who are having to pay their taxes to bear this cost of living crisis, this industry will receive £16 billion in subsidies this year alone. This industry received billions of pounds in subsidies, meaning that not one rail worker worked without full pay during the whole of COVID. Now, this industry in National Rail has seen over 10% drop in passengers. Here in London, on the Underground, nearly over a 25% drop in passengers. Now, can you think of any other industry that has subsidised its staff to billions over the course of COVID that has seen a fall in its custom that wouldn't reasonably say, well, actually, we need to now look at restructuring it and having some voluntary redundancies so that the business can survive? They're not asking for just the same pay and conditions. They want an 11% pay rise.
Because that is the job of a trade union. And here's the thing, why I think it's so dangerous for you to talk about making strike action illegal. Every single person in this country has benefited from rights which have been secured by trade unions and the right to strike, including minimum wage, maternity pay, sick pay. These are all things which, before they were made law, were won by trade unions, and they benefited everybody. Because you're essentially selling a myth to the people of this country. You're saying, well, if you ask nicely, if you play nicely, if you're a good little boy or girl, maybe the bosses will take pity on you. That's not how it works. Workers have one form of power, and that is collective bargaining. And every right we have as workers in this country has been secured by playing hardball.
I'm sorry, but I'm afraid that they now abuse the right to strike. The London Underground strikes, which was the same union, they announced that they were going on strike based on simply the plans of TfL. Now, I'm no huge fan of Transport for London, but based on just the announcement of some of TfL's plans, before they'd even sat at the negotiating table, they said they were going on strike.
Your workers. That's called protecting your
strike
members.
should be the last resort, not the first resort. There was a strike a few years ago when someone on the Underground was found to have been drunk on the job, and they found that they still wanted to go on strike to protect that worker. Now, what would be reasonable, if you really want to hit the bosses where it hurts, run a minimum level of service, as this government is proposing.
I would not trust somebody who works for a Rupert Murdoch-owned station, someone who is ideologically opposed to trade unions, to go, this is what is good trade union strategy. You are ideologely opposed to the idea of collective bargaining and workers standing up for themselves.
That's a ridiculous point, because you work, of course, for an organisation, your media company, which, of course, is going to take the stance.
Don't attack each other, because people are being confused.
We don't want to have a battle about who employs who.
Let me ask you, if you say strikes are banned, what other option is there for a worker that doesn't have power to effectively make their point? If, and this is what they're arguing, the RMT, the bosses won't come to the table, won't consider their position, what else could they do?
Well, firstly, I don't accept that bosses won't come to the table, because as I just pointed out, sometimes they start to strike without that. But you can still negotiate with your bosses
but you have to have a threat, don't you? And the threat the bosses have is firing. The threat the worker has is, I won't come to work. It feels like the bottom line is that's where you are.
There are many, many industries, and there are many, many low-paid workers that many of these unions claim that they want to represent, that don't have the power to strike, that still turn up for work, that still negotiate with their bosses in a way.
So hang on. So you said there are many low-paid workers who don't go on strike. I wonder what the relationship is there. One of the reasons why, particularly on the London Underground, you've got some of the best paying conditions in the public sector, is because the RMT are not who you F with. They go on strike, they walk out, they collectively organise.
And they make
they've got
people
good paying
suffer.
Conditions. And then you're saying to people, well, you know, be a nice little worker, accept your low pay and doff your cap and don't go on strike.
No, be good at your job and go and see your boss and ask for a pay rise.
I think people in this country deserve better. I think they deserve good pay, good conditions, good maternity provision, and good sick pay.
But you don't believe that they deserve enough to be able to get to work themselves?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things, Ash, I was going to say. A lot of the people that get in touch with us, and the vast majority, are absolutely in support of the right to strike, and that being a fundamental right in a democracy. But a lot of them saying, right now, the problem is we are all facing a huge squeeze financially. This is going to impact on all those essential workers that have to use the rail network to go and do their jobs. They don't have a choice. And right now is not the time to do this. And as you said just then, they have good pay, they have good standards, they have good various issues that you know, they have organised themselves in the past, the RMT, so they actually are well looked after. It's a very strong trade union, clearly.
But why pick now?
Why pick now?
Because if you take your foot off the gas, then suddenly all the backsliding on the pensions and the job cuts and the pay provision. I completely empathise with the issue of it being disruptive. I don't drive, right? Public transport is my only way to get around, and that, for me, indicates why it's so important for bosses to come with a serious package to the RMT on pension protection and on protecting their workers from job cuts.
Where does the money come from? We, the taxpayer, are subsidising these industries to the tune of billions already. So now, so people who you claim to worry about will end up paying in their taxes for those pensions.
You know who's not taking, huge pay cuts? You know whose jobs are being protected? It's CEOs, it's corporations. We're looking at, I think, having a cost of living crisis where instead of profits being taxed in order to protect ordinary workers, it's the other way around, right? Ordinary workers are bailing out corporations, and the RMT and other trade unions are saying, we are not having
So they strike in good times, they strike in bad times, they just strike all the time, basically.
And that's how you get things like pension provision and paternity pay.
No, that's how you get legislation that will stop striking. That's how you get that, because the public won't stomach it.
Chris, we're out of time, unfortunately. We have been running a Twitter poll this morning. Just 31% of you think that the law should be changed to support rail workers striking, or to stop them. The majority think that 69% should support the union, so they are behind.
Big support of the idea of the right to strike.
The fundamental part of democracy, isn't it?
Good to speak to both of you this morning.
Thank you, Ash. Good to have you both in this morning.